Hello, dear friends. We're sincerely pleased to welcome you again, and today we're going to talk with the esteemed Igor Mikhailovich Danilov.
Hello.
Igor Mikhailovich, in our previous videos, we talked about the importance of a goal. That if a person has no goal, Satan will impose 1,000 different goals on him. And we also discussed that when a person really understands what the true goal of his life is, and this goal is to come to God, or as the Holy Fathers say, to return into the Lord's embrace, and when a person doesn't lose sight of that goal, when he strives sincerely, he certainly defeats Satan and certainly achieves the goal he has set. You know, what was really inspiring is that you said that a person should be like a ship navigating under full sail in the midst of the sea to the given goal without straying from the course. Yes, anything can happen. Storms happen in life, and there are waves on this path, but still, it is much better to move than to stay in a quiet harbor while the ship's wood is rotting and the ship simply sinks. Therefore, it is certainly extremely important on the spiritual path to advance and to become a strong personality. So you asked our viewers a question in one of our videos: what is the fundamental difference between a weak personality and a strong personality? What is a strong personality? And so,
You know, it is interesting that many of our friends answered correctly.
yes.
This brings so much joy, friends. What is a strong personality? It's a personality that is capable of self-identification.
Such a self-identity,
Of course.
right?
If we start with a simple thing, many people perceive themselves as the body. They perceive themselves as consciousness, and they do not understand that consciousness is not them. And this is where success on the spiritual path actually lies, so to say. Why? Because as long as a person is fused with his consciousness to such an extent that he perceives it as self, he is literally controlled by demons, friends. However, when a person is able to identify himself as personality without confusing this in consciousness, without any games, but in reality, when he clearly observes secondary consciousness, when he calmly observes the work of primary consciousness, and at the same time, he already feels himself as personality, a lot is revealed to him. This is the most difficult stage, so to say. You know, just like in building the creative society, informing is the most difficult stage. Afterwards, everything goes smoothly. So, it is in this case. The most difficult stage is to understand that consciousness is not you, my friend. As long as a person is fused that much, as long as he considers himself primary or secondary consciousness, it doesn't matter. Even if we have learned, let's say, to observe our thoughts from the position of an observer, we understand that these thoughts are not ours. We understand that we do not control them, that again, we only have the freedom of choice. We have the right to choose some or other thoughts, or refuse what is offered by secondary consciousness completely. But when it all happens from the position of primary consciousness, we still associate ourselves with the body, and we still associate and perceive ourselves as consciousness. However, when we already observe from the position of personality, then we already perceive the world holistically. We understand how secondary consciousness works. We see the work of primary consciousness, and in this state, let's say, the gate already opens for us. In the literal sense of the word, all we have to do is take a little step, and we get what we are striving for. Everything is very easy and simple. Well, here, you shouldn't loosen control of it either, because consciousness is a very, let's say, sophisticated, well-trained enemy who knows us to the core. That is why, for many people, it is hard during practices. Even in autogenic training, they cannot focus clearly because consciousness hinders them. And that's where...
Yes, that's right. Still, thoughts very often dominate anyway.
Of course. Definitely. So many people ask, what should we start with? My friends, with a simple thing. The simplest thing is, even before you start in autogenic training, you need to pay a little attention to who you are. And this is important, who you are. Of course, consciousness will immediately throw in, I am personality and so on, but that will be your consciousness speaking.
I'm spirit.
Yes, I am spirit. On some people, it voiced that they are Buddha, Bodhisattva, and everything like that. This is also normal. That's how consciousness works. But in order to learn, even if a person has been performing practices for years, well, it's not he who has been performing. A demon has simply been eating for him. Let's say he has been living instead of a person during that time, telling him fairy tales, while the person stayed in the same place just as he was. Then he should actually pay attention to his consciousness. And again, I'll digress a little bit. For clarification, my friend, it doesn't matter what religion you belong to. If you really strive for God, if you really want to gain eternal life, if you are determined to win, then when performing prayer practices or namaz, even in any thoughts and reflections about God, you should act correctly. Well, let's put it this way. Let's consider a simple thing. When a believer, while performing a prayer practice or namaz, doesn't matter what and where is he oriented to. It is clear that to what means to God. After all, we read our prayers
Yes, exactly.
with an appeal to our Lord God, right? That is, we don't just praise Allah. Although, stop. Everything starts with simple things. We haven't yet learned how to perform prayers, let's say in Islam. But what are we doing? We're already...
There should be remembrance in words.
Of course.
And already afterwards in heart.
We are praising Allah, aren't we?
Yes, exactly.
Just look at what I have done now. We are praising Allah.
Outside ourselves.
Where do we direct our praise? To heaven. Right? And here's, my friends, a simple example. Where did the Prophet himself direct that very praise? And what was he talking about? Only inwardly. Only through yourself, through your soul, can you be heard by Allah. Look how it has been missed. Why? Because again, in various fairy tales, it is said that God is in heaven. He's on a cloud. He is somewhere else. Since he's not here, he is there. And there is such a strong mindset that has actually misled people. Everything starts with that because there are no trifles. Every step on the spiritual path is important. If you haven't made it towards God, then you have made it towards the devil. And this must be understood, friends. If you really strive for God, if you really love Him, so any prayer, any thought, and any praise, no matter how you act, let's say, in our three-dimensionality, whether you raise your hands or raise your eyes, but inside, you must also direct your praise to God. Even if you say it aloud, inside yourselves, there is no other place. God cannot hear you, no matter how loudly you shout. The devil hears you, even when you are silent. This is true, because all your thoughts are his demons. He certainly hears them, whereas the Lord God hears only your sincere love. And that love, which is directed by you as personality, only this love is able to reach the spiritual world and to be heard by the Lord God. But when we, let's say, direct our thoughts, shouts, noise, words, whatever, our actions to the external, with a plea for material benefit, we are asking jinn, we are asking shaitan to help us. And this should be known. Therefore, when addressing shaitan or jinni, forget about Allah. Just forget. However, if you love Allah, you must go to Him, following in the footsteps of the best of people, the Prophet Muhammad himself. Then you will reach Him. Then you will be near the Prophet himself. You will behold the spiritual world. You will be in it as an equal among the equals. But for that, you should really make an effort. It's not an external effort. No matter what you do externally, it has nothing to do with the spiritual. Although there is a small point here. Again, what is the importance of our external actions? Let's sort this out.
Discipline of consciousness.
Firstly, Secondly,
Diverting consciousness's attention to something.
secondly, and attitude, right?
Yes, exactly.
If it helps us to achieve discipline, to tune in, to concentrate, go ahead, friends. You can stand on one foot. It doesn't matter. You can even stand on your head. If it helps you to go deeper inside yourself, you as personality, if those outward actions enable you to achieve this state of freedom, of personality, to feel love and direct it to the spiritual world, it doesn't matter. Do them, right?
Also, Igor Mikhailovich, people say in regards to discipline that a strong personality is also a person with a great willpower, someone who can, in fact, overpower his consciousness and make it do something in a disciplined way. Different religions, of course, have different actions and restrictions.
Also, there are such expressions as a person of strong will, right?
Yeah, sure, exactly.
We have heard that a lot and often.
A strong-willed person, right?
Yes, strong-willed, tough, serious, and so on. If you really consider it and look at the root of this matter, my friends, a person has no willpower. Power, yes, but as for the will, no. We implement someone's will. Here, the only question is whose will we implement. If it's the will from the spiritual world, when inspiration comes to us, when we feel, this replenishment, desire, aspiration to do something good. But notice, it always comes from the inside outwards, and it is directed towards positive good actions, those actions which benefit other people. In other words, it's already an act of service. When we become inspired and do something good for people, that's a will coming from the spiritual world. And what is actually service? Service precisely means to be an instrument of this will and to manifest this will in this world by our actions. This is what service is. However, there is another will from Satan, from Shaitan, which does what? It goes from the outside inwards. It makes us angry, resolute, sort of very serious. Belligerent, right. We may even go to our death.
Overcome something.
Absolutely. We may even go, with handguns against artillery. By command, right? Heroes. But I have a simple question. What's the point? You see, Satan, Shaitan, always leads a person to death. Shaitan's goal, let's say, as long as a person is here, is to rob him blind and make him a subpersonality, whereas a subpersonality for Shaitan is a battery. Clearly, it's not the same power generator as when a person is still alive. Let's say, but it's a battery. We need batteries too, don't we? I speak associatively. It's a small source of income, but it exists. However, when there are billions of such sources, you can do the math yourselves. That's why the world is like this. While pridefulness says something different. After all, Shaitan always says, you have willpower, you can do
Look
it.
how cool you are, how you are defeating me.
Of course.
How you have overcome me.
That's right, exactly.
How much you adhere to all the restrictions you have built up for yourself.
Right. And the person has chosen to serve Satan in the literal sense of the word. Even if he stands, well, it seems to him that he stands on the spiritual path, but in fact, he is a commonplace fanatic of a man who altered the knowledge brought here by the prophets. It only seems to him, while in fact, he is nothing but food. Food for Shaitan. I really pity these people because they strive, they waste their lives, they waste their time. Being inherently alive, they turn themselves into subpersonalities. This is really scary, friends. Why? Because they weren't told and weren't shown the way. They hear, but they don't heed. They look, but they do not see. Why? Because even if they managed to overcome, to defeat secondary consciousness with their prayer practices, primary consciousness, makes them slaves of Shaitan. because it's beneficial for it. My friends, a human is indeed endowed with true freedom given by God. Allah Himself has bestowed upon a human the freedom of choice. So a human chooses between one thought and another, between one emotion and another. He chooses how he will act and what he will do. He chooses to serve Allah or to serve Shaitan. Isn't this true? Just look again. Some people say, why do you talk so much about Islam, right? We say, Allah, Shaitan, and so on. I appeal to you, my friends, Christians. Until today, in some countries, Christians call God Allah and praise Him. Just like Muslims, everything is the same. God is one. However, Shaitan divides us. He divides us in words, in all sorts of games. Isn't that so? He forces us to play, all kinds of games. Sometimes a person misheard something. Sometimes he didn't think it through. Sometimes he didn't perceive it entirely, while in fact, everything is well thought out and precise. He has written all the algorithms on how to manipulate us. But we, friends, have the freedom of choice given by God. Therefore, we can easily refuse what Shaitan imposes on us. He imposes depression on us. He tells us that we are totally hopeless, that nothing will work out for us, saying, you should give up doing those practices or prayers. Why are you standing there, bashing your head, trying to get through to Allah? He doesn't hear and won't hear you. Isn't that what Shaitan tells you? My friends, I'll tell you about the other side. Since he has to make such an effort and dissuade you from coming closer to Allah, it means that you are already not far from Him, which means Shaitan is already afraid that you will get there, and then he won't have a battery. Plus, you will stop feeding him. So, you are already worth Shaitan fighting for you. That means you have a huge chance to come to Allah. Everything is very simple. That's how this world works. That's how it is arranged. Such is our life. Everything is very, very simple, friends. While consciousness, yes, it is that battlefield. Although, no, this is wrong. You see, I've already fallen into a delusion as well. Consciousness is our battlefield. No, friends. In that case, if we are observing a fight in consciousness, have you noticed again? We are observing. This means we are viewers in that theater of actions. And a couple of demons, sent by Shaitan, are arranging a show for us on the stage of our consciousness and telling us that this is our Armageddon. No, friends, our consciousness is not Armageddon. Our consciousness is a manipulator, a feudal lord placed over us by Shaitan. But we are not slaves. We are God's children. Remember that. And we have freedom of choice. This is extremely important, friends. Whatever it imposes on you, anguish, sadness, excessive joy, everything will pass. Whereas much may not come if you don't allow it, if you don't choose it and don't pay for it. Because any sadness, sorrow, anguish, any failure in your life is paid for by you yourselves. It's true. Shaitan hides a lot of things from you, even from our words, from what we want to say, even verbally. Shaitan hides it from you. Why? Because that's the way this world is arranged. This is really so. Many people, when rewatching our videos,
Yes, exactly.
say that it dawns on them after the 10th or the 12th time, or even more viewings are needed.
How could I not hear that?
Yes.
How could I not hear these understandings at all?
How does our consciousness work? For instance, if you read and listen. If you first read, then you hear what you read, although something different is voiced.
Why is it so?
Because, again, in the very system of our primary consciousness, I emphasize, friends, primary consciousness, it is arranged in a way that our eyesight dominates our hearing. This is the animal part. I'll say it again. It's the animal part. Why did I repeat it? Because a human being is a combination. We will tell you about that someday. It's not a simple evolution. A human is dual. And his worst part is the animal part, and it developed precisely the way any animal developed, who used eyesight as the main tool. If it is prey or enemy, we should see it. We've heard a rustle, we should take a look. What we've heard can be criticized, but what we've seen cannot be criticized. Therefore, friends, when you are being told a deliberate lie on television, a maximum of 3.5% of you, I'll put it so, this is a scientifically established fact, can distinguish a lie from the truth, even if the lie is blatant. That is why, friends, we are manipulated by everyone who has access to the media. That's why the world is like this. Unfortunately, it is true. Although the media is supposed to serve us, people, so that we gain life, and so that we make this life beautiful. Don't we deserve that? A simple question. We should not be slaves because we are people, because there is a soul in every one of us, whereas the soul is a part of God's world, the spiritual world. Here is a simple question. When consciousness seeks to enslave one person, and then seeks to enslave others with his help, is this a world? No, this is hell, if it is ruled by Shaitan. Isn't that so?
Igor Mikhailovich, now it is definitely the time for truth. We often mention that, but also you always say that honesty on the spiritual path is the most important thing.
Of course, it's the most important thing. After all, again, who lies? A simple question, who in us lies? Shaitan does. After all, personality doesn't need lies at all. Personality is not interested in this three-dimensional world, not interested in power. It is not interested in anything. Personality has one aspiration: spiritual development. Returning home is what is inherent in it, whereas Shaitan, why, actually? I'll explain, friends, because we have run into a little point again. You and I once explained it, but I'll repeat it to make it clear. Any thought, any message from our consciousness, from Shaitan, so to say, is financed precisely by us as personality. I mean, we allocate a part of energy, the life energy, for all this to function, so that by our choice, by our power, all this would be implemented in this three-dimensionality. A simple example. Let's say there are two inseparable friends who have been growing up together since childhood, and they have started a joint business. It's a frequent situation in life. Then Shaitan says to one of them, "Look, he earns more while you work more. Is that fair?" And at this point, it's just a thought that came into a person's head. And this is where a human, as personality, faces a threat. I mean, what does it signal? What signal does it give? The signal of injustice and threat. And a human, as personality, already pays attention. Why? Because personality always strives for peace. It always strives to create such conditions so as to be able to reach the spiritual world. And this is what Shaitan manipulates. So, there is a threat. But again, at first, I'll go back a little bit. At first, when these two friends start a business, what does consciousness tell personality? In order for you to be able to come to the spiritual world, you need what? All the benefits. You should be free. You see? Really, you should be free. What does it mean to be free? To have more time, capabilities, and so forth. So what should you do in this three-dimensional world? Clearly, you should make money, right? So at first, it pushes a person to build a business. When the person starts doing something on his own, consciousness tells him, how can you do it on your own? You don't know this and that. Do it with a friend. Together, it's not so scary. Right? That's why many people, when starting a business, always take someone as a partner, while they could actually cope by themselves.
A lack of confidence in one's own abilities.
No, this is also a tool of manipulation. This lack of confidence in one's abilities is what Shaitan throws in. What is done next? An accusation of a friend. And the person begins to think already, right? I mean, he. What does it mean? The person begins to think. It's not personality who thinks. Consciousness begins a stage performance. Those very actors start telling the person, while he as personality is sitting, like in a theater hall and watching. I believe, I don't believe, I will fund this, I won't fund that. And it gets to the point where people start hating each other so much that they ruin the business, split up, and do many other things. Yet why? Because they question the honesty of their friend. Whereas in reality, they are not honest with themselves. That's where honesty is. If a person says that he doesn't strive for God, he is a liar. If a person says there is no God, he is a liar. Why? Because the personality of every human strives for God. It strives for home. And every person feels that. But when he becomes so weak as personality, Shaitan's demons dominate him so much that they even speak for him. They live for him. They simply, control his body like an avatar. This is really true. They are incorporeal creatures, while a human, as personality, is a spiritual being. Yes, he is, let's say, inside this energy structure. But the body is not his either. A human as personality is incorporeal too. We simply wear this clothing for this period of time. And if we live our lives in such a way as to save and improve this very clothing so that it achieves something, well, we act unfairly towards ourselves. I will put it this way. Above all, there should be honesty. When a thought comes to a human, he has to look at what the consequences will be. What comes? Why Shaitan is giving him this idea, what benefits are for Shaitan and what benefits are for the human as personality. A simple question. Let's say he takes up a business, even with a friend. If Shaitan palms off a thought that the friend is stealing, well, why do such thoughts come? Because more than once before that, Shaitan palmed off thoughts on personality that it is necessary to steal a little bit, to conceal a little bit from a friend. And only when a person himself is dishonest can he suspect an honest friend of dishonesty. Whereas if a friend is really dishonest, it shows, doesn't it?
Yes, Igor Mikhailovich, regarding honesty and this very importance, both honesty towards oneself and honesty towards others, I very well remember a study by researchers when they came to the conclusion that this lying, if a person lies, it seriously affects his empathy, which severely decreases.
Of course.
And the person is unable to distinguish another person's feelings. It turns out that this also directly affects mirror neurons, which contribute to a person's spiritual development.
Here's also another phenomenon, of course.
And it turns out that a person might think that in one situation he allowed some kind of self-deception, he lied to himself, while in another situation it seems to him that maybe he cheated another person in something. But as a matter of fact, how cruelly a person deceives himself, first and foremost, and deprives himself of this possibility of exactly spiritual.
After all, lying is a sin.
Right.
And a human pays for every sin. So everything is very honest. If we fall for the tricks of consciousness, if we start lying to people, what will happen? We will certainly be blocked.
Yes.
And the more we lie, the higher our position is. I mean, what does the higher position have to do with that? There's actually a point here. The larger audience our lies cover, the more, let's say, power that very shaitan has over us, and the more of this very negativity we have in us too. We perceive people less and we understand them less. Why? Because we become fixated on ourselves. The whole world starts revolving solely around us. Shaitan turns us into egoists, just blind and soulless egoists. You know, ordinary animals and puppets in his hands. And all of this is a work of consciousness. In fact, Shaitan doesn't force anyone to do anything. He only offers. You know, like politicians on TV. After all, they do not push you. They just tell you while you listen, right? And then you go and vote. And whoever lies best, that's whom you will vote for.
Igor Mikhailovich, but we also understand that this time which we live in, the time of truth, is also very important in the spiritual aspect. First of all, for other people, for each of us, because at this very time,
This is important.
human empathy increases and every single personality actually has a stronger connection with the spiritual.
Do you know why this time, which we live in, the end time, is significant? Because it's the time of truth. And the further it goes, the more truth begins to manifest in this world. So, it seems to me the most wonderful thing is that everything that Shaitan has been building for 6,000 years begins to collapse. You see, this entire shell is falling off. And indeed, the grain of this world appears before the sun. This is wonderful. The only question is what we as humans will choose. Will we listen to Shaitan and do what will lead us to undesirable consequences? Or will we heed that call inside each and every one of you, my friends? After all, everyone is feeling it now. Even Shaitan is telling you that something is wrong in the world. Well, it is immediately attributed to politics, to the climate. However, you all feel that Shaitan is afraid. He is agitated, making you worry and be agitated. But on the other hand, from personality, you feel calmness, peacefulness, and joy. And here, of course, there is a paradox. The end times, what is there to rejoice at? But there is an explanation to that too.
Yet more and more people feel this clear distinction between lies and truth.
Of course.
I mean, it becomes quite obvious for them, even the distinction between lies and truth within themselves. There are actually so many people who say, I feel that I'm somebody's fiction, that I'm as if unreal.
Do you know why? Because more and more power flows into this world. It flows to personalities, to you, my friends, from the spiritual world. And it is thanks to your prophets. They plead Allah to send it down on you. So through His mercy, He sends it down. And indeed, many people as personalities become stronger. But there is a lack of knowledge and a lack of understanding. Shaitan is strong in them. So here, sort of an inner dissonance really happens in a person, you know? He feels one thing, but he sees something different, and he doesn't understand. He actually perceives this world as a matrix, as someone's fiction, as unreality. This happens to many, many people. And do you know what is interesting? Even Satanists begin to worry nowadays because they feel that the earth starts burning under their feet. And it is funny that atheists begin to invent religions for themselves. This is really so.
Yes, exactly.
All this is felt. When a person wakes up, looks in the mirror, and asks himself a question, is this really all that which I see in the mirror, while he feels something different? That's what these times are distinguished by. Everyone hears the call, but not everyone is able to heed it. This is wonderful. Do you know why? Because Shaitan is standing in the way.
When the truth destroys all these lies and when all these lies collapse, a lot of people certainly look for a way out. And you also once said that there is a way out.
Of course, there
It's
is.
very important that now is such a time when we certainly need to direct all our efforts to inform people what the way out is, both for them as spiritual beings, first and foremost, and for our humanity as a whole.
Well, and for this three-dimensional life, because it is possible to change the world for the better,
So
right?
to a certain extent, this is a golden
To
time.
stay in this world happily and for a long time. You know, I'll put it this way. Why destroy our own home? It is actually better to turn it into an Eden, my friends. Isn't this true? To really put our own home in order, to clean it, to make it beautiful and happy, to put the environment in order. After all, we can do anything. The only obstacle is Shaitan, with his demons in our heads. Well, it is time to grow up, because this is our world. While we give it away to the dead, we shouldn't. We should bring everything back. And again, it's all tricks of consciousness. Those little demons in our heads that force us to be slaves of Shaitan. You know, I'll put it as follows. It is disgusting and degrading for personality to be a slave, isn't it?
It is time to become strong personalities.
It is time, friends. It is time.
Then everything is definitely obvious and this shroud of illusion comes off.
A strong personality is capable of many things. But again, you know, we face the fact that Shaitan is saying, tomorrow you'll become a strong personality, while today you must do this. And Shaitan is conducting us again. Friends, take away from him that baton which he is waving in your head, and put him on the periphery of your consciousness so that he would sit there, keep silent, answer only your questions, and would solve those problems which you allow him to solve. But do not let the demon stand in your way to the spiritual world, right? Nothing hinders a human. If he is honest with himself, everything falls into place. Answer honestly. Just sit down, calm down, and answer. Do you order those stupid thoughts which crawl into your head? And consciousness immediately starts looking for plenty of excuses as to why thoughts come. But this is what demons are telling you in your head. You don't really want that. You want to attain peace in consciousness. You know, as if the radio has shut off. Well, turn off the radio in your head, and we will see. Do you know the difference between Shaitan and an angel? A simple question. Okay, let it be the next question. Write to us what the difference between Shaitan and an angel is.
Great.
This is a cardinal difference, right? Generally speaking, consciousness is a very interesting tool, a very clever, well thought out, and properly made one, properly in terms of its functions. You see how easily it deludes personalities, while in actual fact, everything is simple.
As you once said, what can consciousness offer a human here? Only two commodities.
Of course.
And you should be aware of that. It can offer either an alpha, that you are a hero in this world,
Or an omega,
or an omega,
that you are nobody.
that you are nobody.
So friends, it doesn't matter who you are in this world, an alpha or an omega. If you are inevitably dead, but if you are alive, then you don't care at all about either alpha or omega because you're already alive. There's actually a difference. So my friends, let's strive for God. While the path to God is one, and it is through love, so let's love each other. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Igor Mikhailovich.
Thank you, friends.